Hello everybody, this is Emery Peavy and this is my second game journal. Today we are playing the Master Chief Collection, specifically Halo 3 and Halo Reach. Right now this is 3, we're playing on just the pretty generic game mode of Slayer, and I'll get into the rules of that in a little bit, and then later we'll be playing Halo Reach. And then we'll be discussing the whole series as a whole at the end. But in here, I think that just kind of going over basic design rules that the Bungie developers had when making these first 5 games is that they really wanted to have the idea. I think it's specifically their coinage was the 10 seconds of fun, also known as the 15 seconds of fun, some people call it, and others I've heard say 30 seconds. I mostly think it's 10, but that kind of goes right in line with the other idea that they have, which is the golden triangle. And the golden triangle is a kind of a gameplay, I guess, setting, not really a setting, but just a solid firm rule that it doesn't matter what map or level or game mode you're playing on, you're always going to have these 3 ways of getting points by killing enemies, and that's with guns, grenades, and melee. Melee, you hit a guy twice, he's dead. You throw a guy with a grenade, or hit a guy with a frag grenade, it pops his shields. If you hit a guy directly with a plasma grenade, he dies, or get it right on his feet. But it takes longer to explode, and it doesn't go as far, and it doesn't bounce. And then guns won't even go into. There's just too many to talk about. But obviously you have precision and then non-precision. Precision, it takes more accuracy, but you can kill a guy quicker. Non-precision does more damage, it's easier to hit, but you can't get an instant kill headshot like I did right there. And yeah, I think that's pretty good, a good basis, because these games have a really interesting factor in that they are, like I was talking about with Shadow of the Colossus, easy to learn but difficult to master. And that's one of the really appealing qualities of this game. And these games do have a lot of qualities, and I do think that Halo is not necessarily as popular as it used to be. It still has a very big fan base, but just not nearly as big as, specifically with like Halo 3 or Halo Reach, where it was like a big event with like Halo 3. Like I remember specifically seeing the headlines of Bill Gates, I think it was, like handing out Xboxes at the first Best Buy to sell 360s. And yeah, but that being said though, these games are still held up pretty well. I mean, this game came out 14 years ago. I played this game right here just a couple days ago. People are still playing it. There's still an appeal to these games, obviously. And yeah, if we're gonna go into it though, I think we can go ahead and start off with kind of what Yule talks about too, in that, I mean, it's all pretty basic, but I do think that the Bungie developers, at least the lead ones, were all pretty smart guys. In that, you look at stuff like the outcome valorization, obviously, like I said earlier, kill an enemy, you get a point. Get killed by an enemy, you lose a point. Or you don't lose a point, but, they get 1. And the first to 50 wins. Pretty simple, not hard to understand in that sense. And, it's obviously, you get experience to level up outside of the match if you kill the enemy, or if you win the game, and you don't if you die. That's with Halo 3. With MCC, they move all of the experience across all games into 1, and you can only progress. It's just your performance in the game changes how much you progress, or, how quickly you progress, if that makes any sense. But, yeah, going into that, though, we're going past that, I apologize. Then you get to stuff, like, I think another thing, too, is the rules of the game world, and that's something that I think Halo does well in both its multiplayer and its single player, is that you never necessarily believe that, somebody could use a laser sword, or energy sword, as they call it in the game, or somebody could jump from a giant space station onto the Earth and be more or less fine because they had their super armor on. But you do believe that, if I shoot this guy in the head, dies, stuff like that, you know what I mean? And it never, and like also another thing too, you never felt like you were fighting in, I mean, obviously this is a very odd structure, this level of this big bridge connecting these 2 towers, but you never felt like this couldn't be a plausible location for people to fight. And I think the next game mode I'm going to be playing in Halo Reach, called Invasion, does a better job of being more plausible to be something that takes place within reality, obviously. But that's besides the point, though. You still feel like, well, this could happen in the supposed Halo universe, And then I think we're going to go ahead into time and how Yule's ideas of time kind of work into this game. And I think a big part of it is that, well, for one, it does take place in real time. I mean, obviously there's the odd idea of, these guys just when they respawn, they just appear in the middle of the map from nowhere. But that, once again, like I said, that's something you kind of can put off to the side in your head because that's just something video games do. But yeah, and I think that's is kind of necessary. You do need to keep a fast pace with this because there is kind of an ebb and flow, not to use the flow term that is in class, but there's an ebb and flow back and forth between taking enemy spots, especially, well, this is more of an even kind of playing field, but other maps in the Halo series will have like a central tower, which is difficult to overcome and to get into, but once you do get in there, you kind of have a control over the map, and you kind of go back and forth between who controls what. Another thing with Halo 2 is the power weapons, who has what power weapon on the map, who's, taking over what location, that kind of thing. But going into the flow, I mean, once again, back to the beginning kind of stuff that we were talking about, flow is definitely a part of Halo. There's been so many times where I feel like I'm in the middle of a match, and it's, I'm doing pretty well, or maybe I'm not even doing well, maybe I'm doing poorly, but I still feel like I'm really just, like, you can lose yourself in these games. And that was the end of the game right there. But you can, like I said, really lose yourself pretty quickly. And I think that's why these games can be addicting, not just Halo, but other games like Battlefield, or not Battlefield, I meant, Call of Duty, or let's say like Tetris or Solitaire, or even Checkers. Like, they can go so fast depending on how you're playing. Obviously, in Halo, if you've got only a few members on the team versus many, it's, the more players you have, the quicker the game's gonna theoretically go. But moving into this, though, real quick, before I get back on topic, this is Invasion. I actually, speaking of having less players, you do get penalized for quitting in the game, so I didn't leave this match. And the reason I would have is because most of my team left, and so it was kind of an unbalanced game. So we did lose, but I mean, that's fine. It's just, I wanted to show some of this, even though, even though it isn't a complete match. But then I'm also going to show the opposite side, the end of another match in a minute. But anyway, Invasion is a more logical kind of idea that could take place in these games. Right now you see I am playing as a human Spartan in the game, fighting the alien elites. And the idea is that you have a team of Spartans or elites. It depends on the map. But one team will progress through the map while the other team defends. Right now we're on offense. And the point is to stand in these little centrical points that you'll see on the top of the map in a second. And you stand in them for 20 seconds, and when the gauge reaches 0, then you take that point, the timer resets, and you go to the next point. And that's another thing, too. You can kill as many enemies or die as many times as you want, but the actual threat in this game mode is actually the timer. Like I said, you can die as many times as you want. There's no penalty. You just have to get the objective done within the allotted time. And like I said, in this we unfortunately don't. We get kind of close, but we don't. And once the timer goes below 7, as you can see up here at the top there, if it goes below 7 and you die, like say the timer got down to 2, but the enemy managed to kill you right before, the timer unfortunately will go back up to 7. Or I say unfortunately, but that's to kind of keep it balanced. Just so that way the enemy team can have, or the defending team can have a fighting chance. And yeah, I don't know. I think that this one is more of a favorite to me, even though it's definitely not as balanced. And sometimes not as fun. If you have a team that really doesn't know and it's just know what to do and it's just going for getting kills, it can be very frustrating to play with, but that's besides the point. But yeah, you go through these 2 points, and then usually there's either a second 2 points that you have to take over. Sometimes they'll add in an idea, or they'll add in like an additional objective, such as having to carry a bomb to the second point and arming it, so that way there will be an explosion. But every invasion game mode, depending on the map again, or regardless of the map actually, ends with a power core that the offensive team has to take and then return to a sort of drop ship, just like another waypoint, to end the mode, or end the match. And once that is done, then the offensive team wins, and that's the end of the game. But yeah, and I think I think that there's a little bit of a different pacing thing with this mode versus the other one, but but it still works though. I think this is much more, I would say, kind of slower pace, but there is still, like I said before, an ebb and flow to it. And yeah, but we're gonna keep going through this. I think in a minute we're gonna talk about some different things in here, but now I'm gonna move to aesthetics. And once again, they've kind of changed with each game, and that's partly to do with different systems that they're on. Of course, the original Halo and even Halo 2 to some extent was a lot more, what's the word I'm thinking of? A little bit more crude, just because the hardware it was on couldn't handle the more intensive designs. And yeah, as you can see there, we only had half the teammates for some reason. But, oh well. And now we're going to an opposite one, where this is from the perspective of the offensive team. I'm going to fast forward this a little bit to get to it. And okay, here we go. So as you can see here, this is playing as elites on offense, and that's the power core. I just wanted to skip to this because this one did take quite a while to get through. And yeah, and this is actually on I think a fan-made map, which is something else that's cool about this collection, is that it uses different aspects from, like I said, fan-made stuff, and they just really go into that. But moving into aesthetics though, it's kind of harder to tell because as you can see here with the strange textured buildings, that this is a fan-made map. They're using just the kind of general assets that the developers made for the gameplay. And yeah, but as I was saying, each game kind of changes the aesthetic a little bit, with sometimes them keeping more similar steps to the others. But yeah, I think Halo 3 and Reach are probably my favorites in that they really made the gameplay aesthetics both appealing, but then also practical. They've changed it since when the developers swapped over, but with Halo 3, the original team actually had they had this philosophy with the sound design specifically, to where they didn't really want the guns to sound realistic or even like cool as much as they did. They wanted them to sound distinct and unique. And I think that that's a really important and interesting idea, and I personally like it a lot. I think that that was playing more so to casual, or I say casual, but not as intensely devoted fans, if that makes any sense. And that's not a bad thing at all. It really isn't. But I mean, if you've played, I don't even know, like hours and hours of this game, you're going to know the difference between one type of enemy and another, or one type of weapon sound and another. But for example, I think in Halo 3, the assault rifle didn't sound like an assault rifle. It just kind of sounded like a pea shooter, as some people call it. But the reason they did that was so that it would sound distinct, because they had other fully automatic weapons that did not sound like that, if I'm making any sense. Because that way they wanted you to be able to hear that weapon being fired from across the map and know exactly what weapon that was. Or with a sniper rifle, you hear that distinct weapon sound go off, you know exactly what's coming after you. Sorry, it's me getting blown away. But yeah, and I think specifically with the sound design, they did a really good job, and that's partly to thank because of Martin O'Donnell, who did the sound design, and I think even by Halo 3 was the director of the whole game. And people have had some problems with him as a person, but as a developer for these games, I think he's really outstanding in some of the stuff that he's done. And yeah, I don't know, I just think that you can tell that they were very closely working together, and it really works out. And the team, like I said, the original team, as the games kind of went along and they got to Halo 4, or more specifically, I'll say 5, the teams did get very big, so where it was kind of hard to really get a good grasp on the different designs, because the teams got so big it's harder to work together. And yeah, and it's not necessarily bad, but they didn't feel quite as cohesive, the different elements. In fact, one of the biggest, I didn't get a good shot of it, but here's what our team had won. But yeah, they didn't really have quite as much cohesion as they could have, in a sense. But anyways, now that clip is over, I am going to kind of abruptly end the discussion on aesthetics, and we're going to move over to the idea of customization and identity that we kind of touched on in the discussion post a little bit ago. This image will open. That'd be really great. So apologies for the very small images, but kind of wanted to go over the kind of specifically the identity aspect of these games and how they've kind of evolved over the years, and for the better, I think. And we're just going to go off with the original Halo 1. It was pretty simplistic. Most of the game modes online, you just had a red team and a blue team, but for games like Slayer, where it's everyone against everyone, you get to have your own colors, and there wasn't a lot of colors. It was all pretty rudimentary, but it worked out just to differentiate yourself. Oh, I'm not the red guy, I'm the yellow guy, or the blue guy, or, etc. But yeah, there wasn't a ton to do. And then you get to Halo 2, and you have more or less the same customization for Spartans, but you also have the elites here that you can play as if you want to. This is from a really old screenshot, and I apologize. Some of these, it was hard to find exact images. I originally had video of me going through the different options you could use in the game mode, but that file got corrupted, so I just went with this instead. And here is Halo 3, where you really get to have cool armor customization. As you can see, not only can you do color, you can change things like, I think specifically it's shoulder pads, helmet, and then chest plates, and I think knees as well. And yeah, it was just, or maybe it wasn't knees, maybe I'm thinking of something else, but anyways, it was a lot more intensive, and you could also select gender as well with Halo 3. And it did actually, the models didn't change at all, but there was a female voice actress, and you would only really hear it if the characters died or got killed. And yeah, and I think before I continue, I want to go into the single player aspect of these games, in that in each game you play as the character of Master Chief. And at Halo 2, they introduced the Arbiter, and the idea with the Master Chief and Arbiter is that the Arbiter definitely had a lot more character to him. He had an arc and a purpose, and it changed no matter what you did as the player. The Arbiter was an elite, by the way, just in case whoever's watching this has no idea about that. Whereas the Master Chief was, according to Martin O'Donnell, was actually specifically designed to be as vague as possible, and you never see his face. Whereas in the first cutscene of Arbiter, or for Halo 2, when he plays the Arbiter, you actually see his armor getting stripped from him, and him getting branded for failing in his duties in Halo 1. And it does make an interesting dichotomy, and it makes a lot of people prefer the Arbiter over Chief. I personally find the Arbiter to be a much more interesting character because of that, but I also feel like Chief is more iconic just because more people can relate to him, and that's just because he's so vague, and you never see his face, with one exception from a game that wasn't made by Bungie in Halo 4, where you do see his eyes, and you can see that he's a white male. I mean, you already know he's a male, but you specifically see that he's white, which I think was, in some ways, I think if you're going to humanize the character, go all the way, don't just show that he's white, But yeah, so then you go on to 3, and you just play as the main character, Chief. You don't go with the other character as well, but yeah. Oh well. And then this is fan art here, actually, but this is for Halo Reach, where you do get to go and go even further with the customization options in the game, and it really is it's a lot. And it took me forever to find this, but in this one, actually, when you picked a female character model, it was actually a different model, not just a different voice. And a lot of people really appreciated this. I thought it was definitely better than just the change in voice acting. Not to say that that wasn't appreciated, but they went a bit of an extra mile with it. And yeah, and then Halo 4 actually took away the option to play as the elite characters. And I won't go into why, but here we have Halo 5, where pretty much the same things as 4. You can customize the character and the armor a lot, pick male or female. But I'm actually going to focus on these characters on the left here. So if I'm able to zoom in, I will do that. Then we'll move to the right. Oh, we can't move to the right. Okay, well. Anyways, these characters on the left here were the original team that was made for the single player of the game. And I think this is important because I think one of the reasons people really like Halo a lot more in the customization option is because you're wearing a suit of armor, no one ever sees the face. You can pretty much just put whatever you want in there, be it an original character, yourself, somebody else from the game. It can be anything, and I think that was a really good call. And like I said, this character to the right were already existing characters from, I believe, books, except for Chief here, of course. And this, once again, character Buck here is the one exception. He is played by Nathan Fillion from a previous game, but these three, in the story, all playable, are important characters who are completely original. This is Tanaka, Locke, and Vale. Vale is a, I think, female Asian actress who plays a, once again, character of the same ethnicity and gender. And then you have Tanaka and Locke, who are, I think, the first playable black characters in the Halo series, which is, I think, good. I think it's a little odd that it took it until the 5th game to get to that, but oh well. And Locke is actually arguably a more important character than Chief is, which is, I think, pretty cool. But I think that this was important with 5, because as much as people didn't really like that game's narrative, I think it was important to have the narrative include more playable characters that weren't just Chief. And people go back and forth on why they do or don't like that, but I think that's kind of besides the point. But I think that this is a good direction to go with this kind of stuff, and this is actually thanks to 343, who wanted to do stuff like this instead of Bungie. And you know, I think that that's just something you kind of need to do. You need to be able to add more stuff like this, add more, not necessarily representation, but I feel like if you want to have, especially at least with online play, if you want to have that stuff, you can keep that the same, because you're never going to see your character's face. But if you're going to add more characters, why not, you know, represent more people who play these games? And yeah, and another thing too is that they wanted to make sure too that you have, I think it's Linda, Kelly, Vale, Tanaka. Half the cast is female, half the cast is male. And you can pick who you want to play as when you play one of these two teams, which, once again, for people who want to play as the character Locke, they can do that. People who want to just play as Chief, they can do that. People want to play as Buck or Vale, Linda or Tanaka, they can all do that. And I think that adding that kind of customization to the gameplay itself in the single-player mode is just going an extra step that really does help people get to form their own identity with the game, and I think they've done a really good job with it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you for watching this game journal, and you guys have a great day. Bye.